What's up, you guys? Thank you for joining me for another installment of Compound Forms. Okay, we're talking plyometrics and front squatting. I'm Johan Francis from Coach Johan CSCS, and this is another Coach Johan CSCS session. All right, so if you remember front squatting, we are going to advance our knowledge a little bit more with plyometric foundations. Plyometric foundations, guys. They increase power and bodily power awareness. Okay? There are hundreds of athletic moves that are in fact plyometric, some of which you've never even thought of. And going along with those moves, there are hundreds of exercises that promote plyometric muscle memory and pathways. You can literally isolate local muscle groups, biceps, triceps. You can isolate your calves and do calf plyo. You can do abdominal plyo. You can literally isolate local muscle groups and build them up with plyometrics. Me personally, I'll use my TRX and I'll isolate muscle groups and I'll do some deficit bicep curls. I'll add tension and tempo to doing jackknife moves on the floor with the ball or the suspension trainers, and have folks work plyometrically, because what we're going to learn is that plyometrics have to be broken down into three separate kind of phases. And as long as we're using those phases in our fitness, we're working plyometrically. Okay, so in three parts, particularly seen in the jump squat that we covered in the video, we're gonna see that this is a great way to promote power. It's a closed chain move, meaning we're attached to this is actually open chain once we jump, okay, but closed chain when we squat. And it uses your body weight, and because it uses your body weight, of course, a jump squat, that's just you jumping. You're able to do a lot more reps within a given time frame, because you're doing more reps within a given time frame. Okay, you're gonna be able to do a lot of work. You can keep working plyometrically. There is always an upper limit when we're working with weight. Just very basic strength and conditioning principle, which is why you would superset weighted moves with body weight, TRX suspension trainers, if you wanted to work two types of energy system phases with one or two muscle groups. Primarily, we're going to talk about the eccentric. Okay, this is the first one. So it's where we stretch all of the muscles on the way down in a jump squat. This preloads. Okay, so actually I'll refer to everything as a jump squat. So it'll preload the quads, the glutes, all the muscles we're going to use to jump. And it involves relaxing the working muscles initially, which is the same, you guys, as flexing the stretching muscles. Eccentrically, you're stretching the muscles that you're going to use. As I descend into a back squat or a jump squat, I'm stretching my quads. These are getting lengthened, right, from the origin and insertion of the quad along the femur. Of course, the tendons go lower than that, but as we start to lengthen these muscles, we're able to, with skill and time, actively do so. Okay? Actively stretch them. Maybe we can contract proprioceptively to do that, but we're actively thinking about stretching this guy, the quad, the glutes, so that we can use those two primary movers in the act of a jump squat. We do this by way of this. This is the isometric phase of a plyometric move. Instead of saying that, we just call it amortization, okay? And this is one of those foreign words that if you've never strength trained or worked with a strength coach or studied any of this muscle physiology and exercise prescription, you would never probably hear this word outside of strength, because it has a very specific usage. This is where we transfer all of that energy Okay, so I talked about that proprioceptive relationship where one side is contracting and one side is stretching. Well, we want the stretch side to move our body. So in order to do that, we amortize. And in that brief micro moment from stretch to contract, the body stabilizes, we balance, it sets the motor units, it starts to summate all of those muscle groups in order to produce a huge, powerful jump squat, okay? It's the bottom. It's that predetermined sweet spot adjustment that we know we're going to go to in our mind before we start. If it's all out, for example, as I go back, the sweet spot might be way down here. If it's multiple reps, the sweet spot might be higher, right? And I want you guys, as I mentioned terms like summation, to download on CoachJohanCSCS.com. I want you guys to go to courses, find this course in the filters, and download the key terms. So right here, this is the peak depth, I guess, or the lowest part of the squat. So it's where my shoulders are plumb with the ankles, right? And what you'll notice is I'm actively loose through the back. Dorsal part of my body and the frontal part of my body is relatively tight until we get to the hips. The movers, I'm actively hard here and disassociatively, which is not a word, but disassociation means one part of your body is hard and the other part is equivocally soft. Okay? One side is moving, the other side is hard. That promotes proprioceptive stretching. And this is what we're doing here. And you'll notice I got a nice hard flex in the front and stretch in the bottom. Most of my work on the way down was loaded into my toes. I'll transfer and amortize into the heels. And guys, this is taking a moment. This is not a huge weight when we're actively working a jump squat or when we're working out and getting stronger. This has to be very fast because what happens is we lose a lot of our work with heat. So you want that turnover to be relatively fast. So at the bottom, this is the stabilization through the floor, right? If one leg was up, I would lose a lot of energy. If, my feet were oddly displaced or one was over-rotated, I lose a lot of energy. But as I'm set, I've worked all of these stretching motions down into the floor on my eccentric move, right? I have decided, hey, balance, tighten up at the bottom, and now explode up on concentric. And that's the last part, right? That's the explosive expression of what we do when we set ourselves up for plyometric work. It's the agonist muscles beginning their contraction. Elastic summation, which essentially means all of those muscles at the same time have stretched themselves out, maybe actively, right? If we're really skilled at getting those muscles to be actively stretched, which is something you must work on as top-end athletes, as coaches, we're either promoting that by having our athletes, right, and trainees sit in positions where they're isometrically stretching one muscle in a boat position per se, right? Something like that. Very easy to promote that. You want to make sure that you got an active stretch in those muscles, right? The connection needs to be there. But once we turn that over, boom, right? It turns into a big explosive expression, a nice jump, a heavy punch, arms flail out, right? In fact, if I look at this right now, I could be like, oh, I'm jumping up into the air. I know what muscles I just used to jump into the air. What muscles got me there? Well, it was my quads contracting and my glutes contracting. Well, in that same fashion, I could say what was stretched as fast as they were contracted. Okay, my chest is out. That's stretched. Previously, my shoulders were rotated back and my rhomboid muscles and all those surrounding muscles were contracted. You see my knees were straightened here, hard. So the quads, right? And the calves were what was stretched. The calves and the hamstrings, right? It's getting used to that. You'll see and intuitively predict these kinetic benchmarks, these kinetic cues or instructions to your trainees, all right? And when you're practicing. But one of my favorite ways to work this is to change the tempo. So if you change the tempo, and I'm not going to read every slide word for word, what I want you guys to know in this particular case, that a 1-1-1 tempo is what you normally are doing. 1 second, eccentric, amortize, and concentric. But in jump squats, you can change that tempo. So what I could do is I can overload any of these in order to work them a little bit more to produce the best quality 1-1-1 tempo. So the 1-1-1 tempo is what I would want. Those are relative. That doesn't have to be exactly 1 second. It just means it's relatively even, right? But I can adjust these two the way down, the eccentric and the isometric amortization part. The concentric is explosive. It's immediate, so it doesn't get a lot of love in terms of like how much you want to spend overloading it, because it's just supposed to be explosive, right? You don't snap a rubber band harder by like working. You don't, if you want to snap someone with a rubber band, right, you pull it back harder and hold it longer. You don't like force it towards their arm. You don't pull a bow and arrow back as far as you can and then shove it out of its notch position. That would be ridiculous and anti-physical, like a crime against physics, right? So what we can do is we can descend really slow, as per the video, to again teach this new neural and motor unit pathway. If we can teach that motor unit pathway to slow down and extend, actively stretch the future movers of the movement, which would be the hips, or excuse me, which would be the, in this case, the glutes, the quads, and the tibialis, right? We can actively contract the antagonist muscles or stretch the movers, okay? You following that it's a proprioceptive relationship, okay, front and back? We want to make sure that if we do this, that the rotational balance is there. Rotational, not shearing forces, and never hyper-rotated. And we want to find that new plumb line at the bottom, right? Which is from ear to ankle bone. Another way to change the tempo is to go 1 second down, hold. Now, instead of it being amortization, it's more of an isometric contraction, right? It's more of an isometric contraction where we ask all of the non-working muscles to summate into the actual contraction by holding everything really, really tight. You'll often hear expert powerlifters talk about how they apply force to the bar with their upper body when the bar is on the floor when they're deadlifting. It's like, what does your chest have to do to the deadlift? Well, every muscle that you can recruit will add to the overall movement speed of that bar. If that bar speed is high, we elicited more power, okay? Well, what we do is we recruit more muscle tissue to do that. And how do we recruit it? We start by stretching a bunch of muscles or contracting their antagonists. Then when the move starts, you flex those same stretched muscles, and guess what? You summate. You summate into an active lift. So the chest actually flexes at the bottom, it stretches on the way up, allows for that back to get tight, which then the kinetics happen, right? It's a deck of cards. The low back, the glutes, the extension, and then you get a nice deadlift. Well, in the jump squat situation, you can actually get your upper body into it in the same way, okay? You just want to tighten to prelude more muscles. And I do this a lot with my fighters and younger amateur guys inside the gym. Okay, you guys, go ahead and head over to the website and download that form. I want you to study your keywords and join up on Facebook. Until the next lessons, stay up.